All right, so let's go ahead and formally get started. It's so nice to meet all of you, and it's been a pleasure chatting with some of you and before we got started. As some of you here live may know, my name is Jeremiah Lee. I am an international student advisor at Berkeley International Office. I also serve as our programming lead, which we're at Bio. We're trying to bring back a lot more programs and events and workshops and things to support you all, not just with advising, but outside of your advising as well. Some things that I'd love to point out to you. We do have coffee hours starting next week. It's going to have some discounted coffee. We're at a coffee shop downtown. We're a great way to build community. We have a ton of events during International Education Week and new programs and workshops coming up. So stay tuned and look at our Bio newsletter because we at Bio are here to support you not only on work authorizations and the things like I'm going to talk about today, but holistically as well. We want to make sure that you're having a great time and adjusting to life here at Berkeley well. So it's so nice to meet all of you. As I mentioned, my name's Jeremiah. If that's difficult to say, you can also call me Jerry. Today's presentation is all about work authorizations. And if you have any questions at all, your answers are not answered today, you can always email our office, come to an advising session. We have virtual and in-person advising sessions. We just don't have advising on Wednesdays. Every other day of the week, we do have advising. So, and as was mentioned earlier, I'm going to go through a lot of information today. Most of your questions will be answered during the presentation, and it's going to be a little bit difficult for me to present and monitor the questions. So if you could hold your questions till the end, I'm sure that your questions will be answered throughout, but if they're not, I'm happy to stick around and answer them today for you, okay? So first thing I want to talk about today is all about employment authorizations. So the first thing I want to talk about is on-campus employment. And before I do start, let me just preface by saying a couple things. This presentation is going to be for F1 and J1 students. If you were another visa category, I'm not going to be talking about work authorizations for your visa category. At Bio, we only advise on F1 and J1 immigration statuses and worker authorizations related to that. So if you're in another immigration status, I'm not going to be able to cover work authorizations for you today. I will also say I'm going to start, and most of this presentation will be for F1 students because there's a lot more differences and a lot more information. At the end of the presentation is where the section where I would talk about the off-campus work authorizations for J1. So if you're a J1, stick around, be patient. We will get to the J1 off-campus authorizations near to the end of the presentation, okay? So let me first talk about, before we jump in, about off-campus work. What can you do on campus as an F1 or a J1 student? So for F1 students, if you are an F1 student, you do not need any work authorization to work an on-campus job. If you are a J1 student, you do need work authorization. It is a pretty simple form for J1s to have a work authorization, but you must get that work authorization before you can work any type of on-campus positions as a J1. F1, you can work up to 20 hours a week on campus without any work authorization. And, Berkeley's a big place too, with lots of different startup companies, things like this. It's important for you to note what is considered an on-campus job, meaning that you are employed by UC Berkeley. So if you're getting paid by UC Berkeley, cool, that is on campus. If you're getting paid by an external organization, one, you should check with Bio first before you even beginning working there, because any off-campus work requires work authorization. And two, double check with us too, because it may be that it's like, for example, if you're working at iHouse and the paycheck doesn't come through at Berkeley, so there are certain employers that are approved to be on campus, even though they wouldn't be. But generally speaking, if you're on campus, looking for on-campus work, it means you're being paid by UC Berkeley. That's kind of our test to see if it's an on-campus job or not. During the fall and spring semesters, whether you're J1 or F1, employment is limited to 20 hours a week during the fall and spring semesters. In the summer, you can work as much as you want during those breaks in between. During these vacation periods. The exception to this, if summer is your first semester or your last semester. So if you're graduating in summer, you cannot work full-time in an on-campus job then. That's the only situations. If you're doing a change of status, you have to wait until you're actually approved for this. For F1s, you can start working on campus up to 30 days before the program started in your I-20. J1s, it has to be after the start date on your DS 2019. And for transfer students, it's after it's been released. But basically, on campus, keep in mind, F1, you don't need a work authorization. J1s, you do. Please check out more about this on our on-campus employment page. And again, these slides will be provided to you afterwards. So check out this. All of these, our Bio website's awesome, by the way. Check it out. Most of your answers are going to be there. So let's get into off-campus employment, which is why most of you are here today. So the first slide I show you is going to be like a chart that kind of goes over all of the different types of off-campus employment types for F1 students. Please note, I'm going to go in depth for each of these different ones. The first slide's just kind of an overview for you, okay? So, at least not the first slide, excuse me. One of the next slides up coming up. So there'll be a long one that I go over a bit. So off-campus employment basics, the first thing you should need to know, whether you're a J1 or an F1, all type of work, any type of off-campus employment must be directly related to your major field of study. So if you are studying, public policy, it needs to be related to public policy. But if you're studying public policy and you find a job that's in marketing, jobs must be related to your field of major. So this is something that on the CPT request forms, your off-campus employment forms, you have to get your academic advisors to confirm that any jobs are related to your major. We at Bio are all about immigration experts. Sometimes I get students who are into biochemical engineering and are like, hey, does this job relate to my major? I have no idea, right? I don't know anything about biochemical engineering. I studied my master's is in teaching. I don't know anything about that. So that's why we rely on your academic advisors who are specialists in your field to say, yeah, that makes sense. This job is related to your major. Um, and it's important for you to note whether you are F1 or J1, you absolutely cannot work off campus. And I will say this from many, many times today, paid or unpaid, until you receive work authorization for that. Do not work off campus without proper work authorization. This is a major violation of your immigration status that can lead to having your immigration status ended. And our job at Bio is to help you protect your immigration status, to complete your studies. So we're not trying to say no, no, no to be bad guys. We're doing this to protect your immigration records so you can complete your studies and reach your academic and career goals. Okay, so you must get work authorization before starting any type of off-campus work. Here's that slide I was referencing. That's kind of a major chart that goes over to different things. These are the employment options for you F1 students, okay? There's 3 things I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to go in depth on each of these more after these slides, but this is kind of an overview. The first one I want to talk to you about is CPT. This is called Curricular Practical Training, and this is for students this is to be used before your graduation, okay? If it's before your graduation, you will use CPT. Sorry. This one is pretty straightforward. It's authorized by Bio, and it takes us 5 business days to authorize this. Make sure you're submitting your applications well in advance of you starting. Don't come to us and say, hey, I have a job starting tomorrow. Give me an authorization. Not going to happen. It needs to be 5 business days in advance. So plan in advance. Do you need a job offer to apply? Yes, you do. The CPT is specifically for work authorization, saying you're going to work at Google from September 1st to September 30th, and we will give you CPT authorization to work at that company from this date to this date. Okay, so CPT needs a job because it's job specific. During the fall and spring semesters, you can work up to 20 hours a week for CPT. And I will talk about potential exceptions to this as we go along, but generally speaking, these are the rules. Jobs, again, must be related to your major. Self-employment, your own companies are not allowed on CPT. So basically, any type of self-employment is not possible while you are a student. Unpaid employment is allowed, and we do strongly, strongly, strongly recommend you get CPT for any type of off-campus employment, whether paid or unpaid. You can get multiple CPTs at the same time, but again, CPT is employer specific. So it's like from this employer to these dates to these dates. Okay, you got one job at Google, another job at Adobe. Okay, and they can be authorized from an immigration standpoint, but each one needs a separate application. Okay, so that's a little bit about CPT, and again, I'm going to go in depth about this. OPT. OPT, what I want you to know about this, for F1 students, this is for after you graduate, okay? This is your work authorization for after your program end date. It is not authorized by Bio. You get an I-20 from us, and then you will submit an application to the government, to USCIS, and it's going to take somewhere between 3 and 4 months for them to approve you, okay? And I'm going to go in depth about OPT today. You do not need to have a job offer because it's not job specific, and don't wait for a job offer to apply. Jobs on OPT must be a minimum of 20 hours a week. They can be full, minimum is 20 hours a week for these. Again, any job on OPT must be related to your major. Self-employment is allowed during OPT, during the first year. If you properly license a company in the United States and you're working for that company, you could do that. Again, it must be related to your major, but that is also possible. Unpaid employment is also fine on OPT. And multiple employers are all absolutely fine as well. So that's a little bit about OPT. That's 12 months after you graduate. Now, if you are a STEM major, a STEM eligible major, which you can see on your I-20, whether it says STEM or not, and I believe I'll double check, but Cecile could confirm for me if I'm incorrect, but I believe your majors are. I would have to double check your majors real quick.
Yes,
But
for the MDP and the MPP.
thank you for that confirmation. Yeah. So if you're a STEM eligible major, basically you could apply for STEM OP. Whoa. STEM OPT, and so you first apply for 12-month OPT, and at the last 90 days of your OPT, you can then apply for the extension, which would extend your OPT for another 2 years. That again is approved by USCIS, and it's going to take another 3 to 4 months for them. You must have a job offer for this one, and it has to be for a STEM eligible employer, and there's very specific criteria for that. It must be a paid employment. It must be 20 hours a week. They have to complete this thing called a training plan with the employers. Self-employment is not allowed on STEM periods. So if you start a company on your OPT 12-month OPT period, if you're continuing into this, if you're a STEM major and continuing, you are not able to continue working for that self-employment, that's your own company after that OPT period. And you can work for multiple employers, but all the employers must be STEM eligible employers. Okay. Let's go in depth on each of these three now. Okay. We're going to first start with the CPT. CPT is called curricular practical training. This is hands-on training. The government does not see this as just like an ongoing work authorizations. This is meant to be a academic experience. CPT, again, I'm going to repeat that. CPT is meant, from the eyes of the government, meant to be an academic experience. It's hands-on training, practical training related to your curriculum. Okay. In the eyes of the government, that's the purposes of CPT. Okay. So let's talk about the basics of it first and foremost. What is it? Well, it's off-campus employment before you graduate. The document you'll receive that shows your authorization is it's a new I-20 that authorizes you to work for Google from September 1st to September 30th, and it will clearly note the company and the dates you were able to work on that I-20. Okay. Eligibility. You are only eligible for CPT after you have completed two full-time semesters, like a fall and a spring, under the same CVIS ID number. The exception to this is if you are a graduate student completing a degree requirement that says, hey, you have this internship before, and it's a requirement for your program before 2 semesters. Only in those situations can we approve you before these 2 semesters. I'm going to go in depth more about this degree requirement in a second too. You have to have received an internship offer or a job offer in your major field of study. It is approved on a semester by semester basis. So let's say, for example, you wanted to work for Google and you got an offer to work for Google from November 1st until March 1st, right? So it goes in the fall semester and the spring semester. CPT is only authorized per semester. So even if you have this internship throughout, that means you would have to have 2 separate CPT applications technically, because we would authorize you for a fall CPT from like the November 1st until the start of the spring semester, and then another CPT authorization on your I-20 for the start of the spring semester until the end of that internship. So again, CPT is authorized per job and per semester. Of course, these internships must be a course or degree requirement and approved by your academic department. Again, a part of this application is your academic department does approve this for you because they need to confirm it's related to your major. And if it's degree requirement, meaning it's a part of your degree, they confirming that's when it's a normal cycle for you to take this internship or job. Again, must be related to your field of study. During the academic year, the fall and spring semester, it is limited to part-time only, 20 hours a week. There's no limit to that in the summers if you're doing it in the summers. The only exception to this is, again, is if it's called a degree requirement, and I'm going to go more in depth on that soon too. You can only begin that employment once you have received the CPT I-20 and it reaches that start date. So again, if you were ahead of Google from starting from November 1st, you cannot get the CPT and be like, oh, they want me to start earlier, so I'm going to start earlier. You only have that work authorization from the date listed on the I-20 itself. So if you need to start earlier, you're going to have to contact our office and get proper work authorization in advance. Let's go more in depth at this. What kind of work can I do? Work can be short-time work, internships, practicums. It has to be related to your field of study. It can be paid or unpaid. And I know there's often questions, do I need to get it if it's unpaid? We recommend strongly, strongly, strongly that you get it. Any type of off-campus work, must have a proper work authorization. And this is, if not, this is a violation of your immigration status. Get work authorization, get CPT if you have an unpaid internship, is my short answer. So again, self-employment is not allowed during CPT. That's only possible during a 12-month OPT period. This is the general process for getting a CPT authorization. Again, it's a pretty straightforward process because it is approved by our office, not by the, it doesn't have to go send off to the government for this. So the first step you have to do is you got to get a job offer or an internship offer. You got to get that offer letter from them, okay? But again, you can't start that until you get the CPT. So first you get the job offer, then we have a CPT application form, which is on our CPT website that you can get. There's student info and employment sections on that you'll have to complete, excuse me. And then you'll work with your academic advisors in your department, right? To complete, there's an advisor recommendation section that you'll have to complete. And then you complete that with the help of your advisors. And then, and I'll talk more about this in depth, but if you have a degree requirement, which my understanding is that the master's programs, and Cecile, correct me if I'm wrong, all three of your master's programs have a degree requirement, but my understanding is the PhD program does not, correct?
That's correct. And
Great.
for the MDP and the MPP, there are 2 degree requirements. There's the summer internship and the final capstone project in their second year. For MPA students, it is the capstone
Great. So from
only.
an thank you so much for that confirmation. So we can authorize you if you don't, so if you have this degree requirement in your major, you don't have to enroll in another class. Normally students would if they don't have a degree requirement. So if you're like your PhD program in your PhD program here and it doesn't have that degree requirement, you would need to enroll in an appropriate class for the CPT authorization. Okay. It's only specific programs that have this, like, in order to complete the degree, you must get this internship or job in this given semester. Those type of programs have this degree requirement where it doesn't require an additional course. Okay. I'll go more in depth about that soon too. But then once you are enrolled in, so if you need to get enrolled in that class and you're enrolled in that and you have the offer and you have the completed CPT application, you'll submit all the documents to our bio office at least 5 business days before you're supposed to start. We do recommend at least 2 weeks before you're supposed to start because it does take us time to process these. We are processing thousands of documents. So um, please submit at least 2 weeks in advance of when you want to start this internship or job. And then we're going to give you a new I-20 that's going to show you your work authorization. The documents you'll need are an employment verification letter. And on our CPT application, we have a template that we ask you to use. And then proof of that CPT enrollment course if you're not using the degree requirements. Okay. So as I mentioned, right, there's academic requirement. This is meant to be an academic experience, right, in the eyes of the government. So if you are a qualifying graduate program, which it sounds like these master's programs are and have this degree requirement, then you would use this on a CPT application, you'll click degree requirement. If your program does not have that, or if you'd used your degree requirements already, and then maybe you had an additional internship or job you wanted to do, and your academic department will approve you to do that, right? Then we can also authorize you for another CPT if you've already used your one degree requirement. But degree requirements can only be used once unless there's a requirement that there's multiple. If it's once you've used it, it's gone then. Then you need to do subsequent CPTs enrolled in an appropriate course. And that's something that your academic advisor would enroll you in. But generally speaking, most of you, it's probably only going to be doing your internships or jobs during your dedicated times to fulfill your academic requirements. So it's pretty straightforward for all of you. You'll just click this degree requirement box. Just keep in mind that if you did other ones or if you don't have a degree requirement, you will need to be enrolled in a course. And your academic advisor will tell you which course that will be. The CPT course credit ones, you enroll in a course in your major or intended major, and I'm going to skip ahead of this if there's no major enrollment here. Who completes this form? Well, you will complete it mostly, but you will then work with your advisors in your department, and typically this is your faculty advisors or GSAO, and I see that Cecile mentioned contact your GSPP career advisor for review and signature for you all. Okay, so that's who you should be working with in your department. So you will then submit the completed application with the second page completed by your advisors. If you need to, you will enroll in that course required and print a screenshot of that course and provide the enrollment verification, excuse me, the employment verification letter from your employer, basically a job offer. We have a template that we want you to put it in. Submit all 3 of those documents to our office within at least 5 business days before you're wanting to start, and we'll give you a new I-20 that authorizes you for that off-campus employment. Again, typically you can work up to part-time only in the fall and spring semesters, unless it's for the degree requirement. Degree requirements, if it requires you to be in a full-time job for that academic experience, then we could authorize you for that. But generally speaking, it's normally part-time only. Summer, you can work, as long as it's not your first or final semester, you can work full-time in those times. If it's in the summer, enrollment must be, and if you're using that course credit, enrollment must be during the summer as well. And it doesn't matter which summer of session it is in, okay? And if you're graduating in summer, if the summer is your last semester, as I mentioned, part-time only CPT, you must be enrolled in that course if it's if that's a requirement for you, and you must be on that summer degree list as well. Some other things that you should keep in mind about CPT: more than one internship is possible at a time. Like I mentioned, if you could work for Adobe and Google at the same time, but you need a separate authorization for each employer. Each CPT is employer and semester specific. Bio highly recommends CPT, even if the internship is unpaid. Again, I can't say this enough. Strongly, you need to get authorization if you're working off campus, regardless if it's paid or unpaid. Some tips if you're undeclared, which I don't believe any of you really would be here, is to work with your intended major advisors, and there are some backup options if they can't enroll in a specific course. Now, I often get questions from students about like, oh, what if I use a lot of CPT? Is this going to hurt my OPT chances? Does this impact me? So from a regulatory standpoint, 12 months of full-time CPT. Again, CPT can be authorized for part-time or full-time. And usually it's only authorized in full-time in the summers unless you have this degree requirement. If you use 12 months of full-time CPT, we're not talking about part-time CPT, full-time CPT at the same degree level. So let's say you're at the master's level and you use 12 months of full-time CPT, well, then you do not have OPT, because the government thinks in their mind you have 12 months of full-time work authorization that as a benefit of your F1 status. If you used it while you're a student, then you don't get it for after you graduate. If you use 9 months of full-time CPT, for example, and 3 months of part-time, that is still okay. You have not used 12 months of full-time CPT, so you're still eligible for the full 12 months of OPT. It's only if you use the full 12 months of full-time CPT that would make you ineligible for OPT. And again, keep in mind that CPT is an academic experience. It is not meant to be used for continuing authorizations for continuing employment. And even if it's not, even though from a regulatory standpoint, there's nothing saying you can't do multiple CPTs, right? If you have a lot of heavy CPT usage, even part-time, the government will likely take a more close look at your application for OPT, and you'll want to keep careful records of all your CPTs, especially if you are using lots of CPTs. So nothing saying you can't use lots of CPTs, but just keep in mind that and what we consider a lot is 3 or more. So if you use 3 or more CPTs, you're going to get a scary looking email from us being like, hey, make sure you keep careful records. USCIS tends to look more closely at people who use lots of CPT, and a reminder that it's meant to be an academic experience. As I mentioned, right, keep good records. USCIS has been known to scrutinize prior usage of CPT, so always keep your CPT I-20s. These will be necessary when you apply for OPT as well. Keep records of your academic work related to CPT and the employment verification letters for each employers as well. Make sure you keep these for your own protection in case the government asks for them. They probably won't, but you should have them. The CPT I-20s, though, you will need for your OPT application, so very important to keep those. If you want to know more about CPT, definitely check out our website. Very comprehensive website, has a lot of great information there, so please check out it with questions on CPT. Now, just for the sake of interest of time, I'm going to keep us moving to talk about OPT, which is about after you graduate. Again, CPT is during your studies, OPT is after you graduate. Again, it is practical training, hands-on training, but this one is optional. It still has to be related to your curriculum. It still has to be related to your major, but you don't have to do OPT. If you decide to graduate and head back to your home country, that is absolutely fine. OPT is optional. but it is certainly a benefit of F1 status. OPT Basics, it is a 12 months of employment authorization for after you graduate. You will eventually get what's called an EAD card, an employment authorization document, which is the document you will need to show to employers to show your employment eligibility. For CPT, remember I said it was the I-20. OPT, it'll be this card you eventually get in the mail. Eligibility for this, again, you have to be graduating and you have to have spent at least 2 full-time semesters under the same CVIS ID. If you're doing a master's level now, and you did a master's level before, like you did an MBA, for example, and you came here at a different school in the United States and you used OPT at that master's level, you get OPT once per degree level. So the degree levels are bachelor's, master's, doctorate. So if you did another master's level and you used OPT at that level, you do not have OPT at the same degree level. If you did master's level and you did get like an MBA at another school and you did OPT and then you came here and you're in a doctorate level, well, that's a different degree level. You get OPT once per degree level, okay? The process for this is, generally speaking, you're going to submit an e-form to us, and we will then process. It'll get approved by your advisors who say, yep, they're on track to graduate. Then within 5 business days, we're going to give you a new OPT I-20, okay? Again, that is not your work authorization. CPT, it's a simple process where we give it to you right there. OPT, that it's just us recommending you for OPT. Then you're going to use that I-20 and a bunch of other documents and apply to USCIS. It will take anywhere between 3 and 4 months, but 90 days is the average for this. Do not expect it to be any faster than that, unless you pay like an expedite fee, which is very expensive to the government. There's no way to speed it up except for paying that fee. So basically expect around 3 months or so for OPT to take, for your application to take. Work on OPT must be related to your major area study and be at least 20 hours a week. It can be paid or unpaid. And then you can only start once you are approved for OPT, receive your EAD card, and then on OPT, you get to choose your start date. So you would, and I'll talk more about this later, but you can only start, even if you get approved early and you get your EAD card, maybe you have you chose a start date in the future. You can only start from the start date that's listed on that EAD card, okay? Reporting requirements, you are responsible for reporting all information on OPT, okay? We have a platform called the SSU Hub where you go in and type all your employment updates, okay? You're adding a new employer, you're changing employers, you're changing addresses, changing phone numbers, anything like that. All updates are your responsibility to report during OPT, okay? And we'll update, then when you update these in our system, we'll give you a new I-20 that reflects those on that as well. Generally speaking, going back about the application process for OPT, the first thing you need to do, and because OPT is a big process, okay? So I'm going to give you an overview today, but we also have workshops where a whole hour long that's spent on the application process alone, okay? So it's not going to go super in depth about this today. If you're thinking about OPT, my biggest advice for you is to start by reading our website, OPT website, and we have an OPT tutorial, which is like a 70-something page PowerPoint that goes step by step everything you need to know. So before you come and say, come to an advising session and say, hey, Jeremiah, tell me about OPT. My first question will be to you, have you reviewed the OPT website and OPT tutorial? Because that's the first step you should do. Educate yourself about this because it is a pretty long and lengthy process. Okay, so after you've all done all that, then and you feel confident that you're in like right before you graduate, up to 90 days before you graduate, you can apply for OPT. So you can request that OPT I-20. It'll get sent to your academic advisor. Say, yep, they're on track to graduate, and then it'll get routed back to us. We will then give you an OPT I-20 that within 5 business days. Then you'll get that I-20, and then you're going to gather all your documents and you're going to submit this application called an I-765 to USCIS. Keep in mind that you must be physically present in the United States when you submit that button, like click the submit button. You got to be here in the United States. If you're traveling on a break and you're trying to do this, you must wait till you return to the United States to submit your application. Then it's going to wait around 90 days, basically. You're just waiting around at that point, waiting for your application to be approved. And eventually you'll get approval, and then you'll get another week or two after you're approved, you will get that EAD card in the mail. So you can then start working once you receive the EAD card and the start date on the EAD card has been reached. When should I apply? Okay, well, you can only apply remember, OPT is for after you graduate, okay? So you can apply for OPT up to 90 days before the program end date on your I-20. So if you look at that end date, and if it's fall 2024, the end date will be December 20th, 2024. You are eligible to apply for OPT up to 90 days before that. So it'd be September 20th, approximately, for example, in those situations. So you can only apply for OPT in the final semester. You can apply up to 90 days before the program end date. Or if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm graduating early, confirm with your academic advisor and everything to make sure you're on track to graduate. If your program end date does not match when you're graduating, but you know you're graduating and you've confirmed with your academic advisors, you can submit your OPT application up to 90 days before you expect to graduate in that semester. That form will get sent to your advisors who will say, yep, they are graduating in fall 2024 and not spring 2025. We confirm this. And then we'll shorten your program end date and recommend you for OPT at the same time. Biggest tips I want you to take away: do not wait. Do not wait. Apply early. It's a process, and the biggest stress is waiting around. For those of you listening in the audience beforehand, my partner is she's from India, and she had applied. She's a former F1, no longer on that status, of course, but I was with her when she applied for OPT at her PhD level, and it was during the Trump administration, and it took a long time. It took like 5 months or so, and it's so nerve-wracking to sit there and wait for approval. So I can empathize. I know what it's like to sit there and be nervous, and you have a job waiting for you. Do not wait to apply. Right now, it's seeing it not like the Trump era. It's more like 90 days. Depending on what happens to the election, who knows how things could change in processing times. But right now, it takes right around 90 days, and you can apply up to 90 days before you graduate. So apply early. Don't wait. Please keep this in mind. When is my completion date? Well, check your I-20. For undergraduate students, it'd be the last day of your enrollment. For graduate students, it's usually the last day of enrollment or the date you file your thesis or dissertation, or if you're on filing fee. If you're a PhD student filing your dissertation, and there is a little bit of flexibility with that. So if you're thinking about adjusting that, come and speak to us at Bio about your particular situation. OPT application timelines. Okay, before we begin about the timelines, one thing I want to point out from the beginning is that USCIS is the one who reviews your applications. They are in the UTC time zone, which I would double check the time zone, but I think it's either 7 hours or 9 hours ahead of Pacific time. So there are deadlines that you have to submit your application. So if you're, again, apply early, apply early. But if you don't listen to me and you wait until the last possible day, keep in mind in the UTC time zone. So for example, I've seen students apply on the very last day possible. And I say, great, you just made the window, but when did you apply? And I say, on the last day. I said, no, what time? And they say, about 9 p.m. at night. Well, that student got denied for OPT because USCIS received their application after the last date because they're in a future time zone in UTC. So I'm going to say this now, just pointing it out. They are in a future time zone. Don't wait until the last minute, first and foremost. But if you do, this is very important for you to keep in mind about the time zone they are in. Okay, let's talk about timelines for applications. And I only have this slide and I'm sure many of you have a future program end date, but let's just show if you have a program end date this fall, like you are graduating this fall, yay, and you are thinking about when to apply for OPT. Well, you are eligible to apply, as I mentioned, up to 90 days before the program end date on your I-20. So that was September 21st for those people who are graduating with a December 20th, 2024 end date. They can apply as early as that, or after you graduate, you have a 60-day grace period to remain in the United States. Again, we do not recommend you wait. I recommend you apply as early as possible, but some students are like thinking, okay, I'm not going to apply for OPT, I'm going to go back to my home country. Then something changes. As long as you are still here during your grace period and you have not departed the United States, that's a continuation of your F1 status during that grace period, and you are able to apply for OPT in that grace period. So your window to apply actually extends into that grace period. That would be up to February 18th, as long as you're still here. But if you're in your grace period, you don't apply for OPT and you depart, that's the end of your F1 status. You cannot then re-enter an F1 status or apply for OPT. So again, apply early, but your window goes from as early as 90 days before up to 60 days after, as long as you're still in the United States. And then when you apply for OPT, you have to choose your OPT start date. Okay, it's up to you, and there's some strategy behind this, and I'm not going to go super in depth about that today. But you'll have to choose a start date, and that will be in your 60-day grace period. You can't choose an OPT start date before your program end date. It has to be after your program end date and within that 60-day range. So you will choose your start date for whatever works for you, whether that's when your employer wants you to start or if you want to be eligible to start earlier. But you will choose that date for yourself, but it must be in that 60-day grace period. How do I choose my start date? Well, my first recommendation, don't wait for the job offer. Choose, if you need to think about it, choose an estimated, and you don't have a job offer yet, choose an estimated start date and don't wait. Again, don't wait to apply for OPT, to wait for a job offer letter to then apply. Think about what your ideal plan would be. When would you like to be available to start working? And do you have any think about, do you have any travel or vacation plans? So if you choose an earlier start date, so again, going back to this, you can choose a start date in this range. So let's say you choose the earliest start date possible, December 21st. Well, if you're approved before that date, you will be given that OPT start date. And what happens then? Whenever you are approved for OPT and you get that EAD card and you reach that start date on that EAD card, two things happen. One, you are eligible to start working at that time. That's when you would be say, yep, employers, I can start working at this date because I've been approved for OPT. I've reached the start date of my EAD card. I'm ready to start going. But maybe you choose a later start date. You're like, you know what? I don't have a job yet, and I'm a little nervous, and I choose February 18th start date, the latest possible date. But you still apply early, and you get approved and get your EAD card, but it's still going to say a February 18th start date. That means that even though you're approved for OPT and you have your EAD card, you're not eligible to start working yet either. So if you want to be eligible to start working early, then you can choose an earlier start date. Or if you want to have a later start date, this would give you more time to work later and allow you time to look for jobs, to take some time off. But you have to understand that you cannot start working before the EAD start date, even if you get a job offer. You may get a job offer today. We want you to start earlier. Sorry, I chose February 18th start date. I'm not eligible to start until that date. So two things happen when you're approved for OPT and you reach that start date. One, that's when your your employment work authorization begins. And two, on OPT, you get 90 days of unemployment. Okay. So those unemployment days are going to start from when you're approved for OPT and you reach that start date. So if you choose a September or a December 21st start date and you get approved before that, and that's the start date, well, that's when then your unemployment clock is going to start running if you don't have a job reported yet. But choosing a later start date will give you some more time to look for a job because your unemployment clock doesn't start until that. So even if you get approved early, that gives you more time to start looking. So there's some pros and cons to choosing a start date, and it's a little bit of strategy. But again, don't wait for a job offer. Think about your ideal plans, and think about where you are in a job search too. Some other timing considerations to think about. So remember, first step is the requested OPT I-20, and then do not submit your application to USCIS until you have received your OPT I-20 from Bio. If you submit it with an OPT recommendation I-20, you will be denied for OPT. Also, when you receive this OPT I-20 from us, on this first page, not the second page that has the travel signatures, on the first page, there's an issue date. USCIS must receive your application within 30 days of this date, okay? If they receive it on day 31, you will be denied for OPT. That's where remember that time zone, the UTC time zone. So once you get that OPT I-20 from us, don't wait around. I sometimes see students, they get that OPT I-20 and they're like, I'm busy with classes, I'm busy with exams, I'll apply later. Don't wait, because if you wait and it's day 30, right? Keep in mind that time zone. If they receive it on day 31, you will be denied for OPT. So think about that, like basically plan for when you request that OPT I-20 to then as soon as you get it, be ready to submit your application and don't wait around, okay? If you forget to apply for whatever reason and you haven't submitted your application to USCIS, talk to Bio. We'll cancel the first one and give you a new one, but you need a new one to apply or else you will be denied. Keep in mind, you also must be physically present in the United States when you apply. And the only way to speed up this whole process is if you pay like the premium processing fee to the government. The government wants their money, right? So the only way to speed it up is if you pay it. OPT is a little bit expensive because it has several fees, one to Bio, one to the government. But then if you decide to speed it up, there is a premium processing option, which is an extra on top of everything else, like $1,600 something. And keep in mind too, if you wait too long, right? Thinking about this timeline, again, you can apply during that grace period, but your start date has to be in this range. So even if you apply late and you get approved late, you may lose some OPT time if you apply late. More reason for you to apply early. You'll also get a second page on the second page of it. You'll also have a new travel signature automatically, but that's not the date for we need to submit the application. That's on the first page. These are our top 4 reasons people get denied for OPT. Okay. So when you submit your application, number 1 reason is that OPT I-20 is too old. Remember, you must submit your application to USCIS within 30 days of receiving that I-20. This, like, if it is after those 30 days, you will be denied for OPT. If you get rejected or denied for OPT, let us know right away. This happens. It's not common. It doesn't happen very frequently, but if it does happen and you're still in the United States, you can reapply. But we will have to recommend you for OPT again with a new I-20. So do not submit a new application until you've talked to us and gotten a new I-20 from us. Okay. The number 2 reason we still see students get denied for OPT is if they are super eager to apply and they follow the steps in the tutorial, but didn't get the OPT I-20 first. Okay. You got to get that OPT I-20 and then submit that along with your application. We do see students skipping this step sometimes, and I don't know how or why, but you will be denied for OPT if this is the case. Number 3 reason is they submitted the OPT application after the deadline. Remember, up to 90 days before or before the 60-day grace period, right? And as long as you're still in the United States, keeping in mind that down here in red, the UTC time zone. And the number 4 reason we see students often get denied, or most common way, is on the application itself. There's a drop down for the reason, the category you're applying. You'll be, and again, this is all in detail in our tutorial, but there is a reason called C3B, post completion OPT. It's like a drop down. So like sometimes I see students scroll too fast and choose the wrong one. You will be denied if you choose the wrong one. So make sure that you're just being careful when you submit your application there. So more about the work authorization timeline. This is about keeping in mind, let's say, for example, you have a December 20th, 2024 program end date still. You submitted your application, you're still in your program of study, right? So you can work on campus, or you're using CPT, that's possible while you're still a student. Keep in mind that on-campus work, you have to stop working any on-campus jobs after the program end date. You are not authorized to work at all on or off campus after your program end date until 1, you are approved for OPT, you receive your EAD, and then you reach the start date on your EAD card. So in this example, right, somebody submits their application, it's after their program end date, they get approved, yay, they get their EAD card, yay, but their start date on their EAD card is not for another month or so. They are still not authorized to work until they reach that start date on the EAD card itself. Before you submit your application, we do have these document check workshops. We do have a calendar of these. We run these, again, this is like an hour-long presentation where we walk you step by step through the tutorial. After reviewing the website and the tutorial, if things are unclear, then you can come see us at Bio and we can answer but we don't assist on your specific, like, help me fill out my application. No, this is your own application you are responsible for. We have very detailed guidance on our tutorial that you should follow. If you have specific questions, though, come and see us. We're here to help, but make sure you're doing your homework in advance. Let me talk briefly about travel on OPT. So this is often a question we get from students. Be like, oh my gosh, can I travel on OPT? Do I have to stay in the United States? We do have a website on travel on OPT that I want you to check out. On that website, it does have this chart. In this chart, basically, it shows the list of documents you should have with you when you return to the United States, whether it's before your program ended on your I-20, but you've already submitted your application, whether it's after your program end date on your 20, but you've already submitted your application, but you have not yet been approved. What documents do you need? And then on this column, it's after your program end date and after you've been approved for OPT, what documents you should have with you. So there are risks, I will say, to traveling while your OPT is still pending. And those risks are outlined on our travel and OPT page. But pay attention to those risks because there are risks to traveling. Those risks really go down after you've been approved for OPT and receive your EAD card. So if you don't have travel plans and if it's avoidable while your OPT is pending, generally speaking, we don't recommend traveling while it's pending. It's certainly possible though, but we can never guarantee your reentry and could complicate your application. So be aware of those risks. Here are some of those risks. Again, as I mentioned, travel is allowed but not recommended. Basically, if you would have to have somebody keep checking your mailbox here in the United States because like that EAD card's only getting mailed to you in the US, and the EAD card is something you will need to re-enter. So for example, if you get any communications or you get that EAD card, you're going to have to get those sent to you overseas where you're at, which is risky, right? If you get like a request for evidence, they're going to give you a deadline to respond, which can be difficult if you're outside the United States. If you're outside the United States after your program end date and you are denied for OPT, you're done. No, you cannot reapply. Your F1 status just comes to an end. If you're still here and you're during like after your program end date or even during your grace period, you could reapply. But after that grace period, there's no chance of that. So traveling can impact that. Again, as I mentioned, if you're approved for OPT while outside the United States, you're going to have to figure out a way to get that EAD card sent to you overseas so you can re-enter. Also, if your F1 visa is expired, you're going to have a new visa to come back to the United States. But if your OPT is still pending, you cannot apply for a new visa until you get that EAD card. So you're basically stuck outside the United States until you get that EAD card, and then you can then apply for a visa and then re-enter at that stage. So that can complicate things too. And basically make sure you're communicating with bio about your travel plans and being aware of some of these risks. Again, it's possible, not recommended though. Last thing I want to say about OPT is that USCIS is not going to call you to talk about your application. If they do, or they're asking for money, threatening deportation, anything like that, it is a scam. If you receive a phone call from somebody like this, don't provide them information. Contact bio and let us know. Get their phone number and email address and say you would contact them back after consulting with your university officials. Do not give them private information over the phone. They will not reach out to you by phone. So it will likely be a scam. Contact us if this happens. So we want to make sure that you're protected and understanding with these people. Some FAQ for this OPT stuff. Can I change? Often we get this question. Okay, I submitted my application to USCIS. So can I change my start dates? I chose this start date. Can I change it? Well, if you have not submitted your application to USCIS, it may be possible. Talk to us first. Okay. After you've sent it to USCIS, after you submitted it, it is not possible for you to change those start dates. You're locked in. So, and any attempting to change that can cause serious complications. We cannot assist you with this. Do not do it. Short answer. Don't try to change your your OPT start dates after you submit it. It's not possible. Okay, what do I do if what if I can't find a job? Well, again, you have 90 days of unemployment while on OPT. And those unemployment dates start counting from when you're approved for OPT and reach the start date on your EAD card, okay? I'm just noticing the time, so I'm gonna try to speed up a little bit more. If you run out of unemployment days, there is no grace period. You have to leave the United States immediately. So it's important for you to find a job related to your major, paid or unpaid, and report those through the SSU Hub. What counts as employment? Again, related to your major, 20 hours a week, that's it. It can be paid, unpaid, multiple employers, self-employment, lots of different options. Work not related to your major field of study is a major violation of your F1 status. Do not do it. What do I need to report to bio? Everything. Any changes, your employers, if you're adding a new employer, ending employer, changing employers, if you're changing addresses, phone number, email, all of that, and you need to do that within 10 days of any changes happening. And we have a system here that you submit all those updates through called the SSU Hub. Now, let's talk briefly about, can I extend my OPT? Well, there are two options, okay? One option, if you are a STEM eligible major, at the end of your first year of OPT, and everybody, whether you're a STEM major or not, will apply for the regular OPT first. If you're a STEM eligible major, at the last 90 days of your OPT, you can submit a STEM extension based on that. The requirements are much stricter than a 12-month one. You have to have paid employment. It has to be a bona fide employer-employee relationship, no self-employment. There's this training plan that you and the employer will have to complete together. The company must be registered in what's called the E-Verify system and have an EIN, an employee identification number, and work must be at least 20 hours a week and paid. It can only apply up to 90 days before the end date on your EAD card. You could have multiple employers, but each employer, it's STEM extension is employer specific. You will have validation reports during it at 6, 12, 18, 24 months. So that's really in a nutshell about STEM. It is also possible for students who apply for what's like a different visa category with their employer, like an H-1B. In those cases, right, there is a thing called cap gap. So your H-1B, and that's something you would work with an employer on. We cannot advise an H-1B, but if your employer applies for H-1B on your behalf, and it's like basically you have an OPT end date of maybe spring, there's this thing called a cap gap, where it would extend your employment eligibility until your H-1B kicks in on October 1st. Okay, they would bridge that gap, like it caps that gap between the end of the day on your OPT until the start of your H-1B. So that's another option, is another visa category, but that would have to be done with a legal counsel at a company who's filing on your behalf. Okay, and that's not something that we can go super in depth about. Let's talk about the STEM OPT just a little bit. Again, you can only apply for STEM up to 90 days before your end of your OPT period. You have to request a new I-20 from us, and then you submit that application to USCIS, which will take another 3 to 5 months. It does take them longer for the STEM applications than it does for the 12-month OPT ones. USCIS has to receive your completed application before the end of your OPT period. If they receive it after the end of your OPT period, you will be denied for STEM. Let's talk a little bit about, for F1 students, about this grace period, right? So again, whether it's on STEM or OPT or just finishing your studies, you have a 60-day grace period to exit the United States, to either depart the United States, transfer to a new school, or do a change of status. That's after the end of your program end date, or your OPT end date, or your STEM end date. If you so basically, if you don't take action to depart or other actions during the grace period, it'll be a violation of your status, and so don't do it. The cap gap I briefly talked about, right, is the H-1B. It's a work visa that is on employment based that you would file with the help of an employer. Basically, as I mentioned before, this H-1B is a new visa category, so you'd be on F1 until then, and so you're on OPT or STEM and working. Your employer that you're on OPT with files for you, and then let's say if your OPT end date is before October 1st, because your H-1B would kick in on October 1st, this cap gap will keep you employed during this time, as long as your employer successfully submits and you're approved before your OPT end date. So it must be, there's different ways to file it, called change of status or consular processing. That's something to get help with your the help of your employers. And yeah, so I'm going to stop there about H-1B because it goes in depth about things. If you're interested in this, please check out the OPT, STEM OPT page and the CapGap page. We are basically at time now, so I wanted to definitely give time for our J1 students to talk about academic training. So F1 students, I'm at the end of talking about work authorizations for you all. I will stick around to answer your questions if you have them after I talk about the academic training. For those of you in J1, we talked about practical training for the F1 students, and they have either the CPT or OPT. J1 students, you don't have a difference between while you're a student or afterwards. You get one lump sum of work authorization called academic training, okay? Just like for F1 students, any type of off-campus work must get work authorization through academic training for you all, okay? Let's talk about the basics for J1 academic training first. So this is, again, work authorization for J1s. The proof of the authorization for you will be a new DS 2019, okay? To be eligible for this, you have to be here for at least one semester in J1 status before you're eligible for off-campus employment. You have to have a job, internship or job related to your major for this. The authorization is required for each job. It's going to be specific per job, similar to those F1 students. The type of work must be directly related to your major area of study. For you J1s, during the fall and spring semesters, you are limited to 20 hours a week. After you graduate, during the fall and spring semesters, no max in summers. During the after you graduate, if you're using the academic training, because again, it's just one lump of employment authorization, it has to be a minimum of 20 hours a week. There's no necessarily a maximum, but it must be a minimum for after you graduate. And for when can you start working on academic training? You can only begin after you've received your academic training DS 2019, and a start date has been reached on your DS 2019. Eligibility for academic training, again, you have to be a J1 student and degree seeking or an EAP student, have to have been here for a semester, have to have a job offer already. The job has to be related to your major, have to have the J1 health insurance. That is a requirement for you and for dependents as well, including for after you graduate. If you're continuing your academic training, you have to show proof of that insurance, because basically what we'll do for academic training for after you graduate, we're extending your DS 2019 to match when the academic training is going. So if you get an academic training for 3 months after you graduate, we'll initially extend your DS 2019 to end of that academic training. But in order for us to do that, we got to see the proof of insurance, which would be shipped for most of you, or alternative ones after you graduate. Again, for academic training, you just get a lump, right? It is not a lump sum of academic training. So how much time do you get? Well, that depends on how long you're studying here. So if you're here in a 1-year program, you get 9 months. Generally speaking, you get 9 months of academic training, both before and after you graduate. So if you are 1-year program and you use 3 months of that before you graduate, well, you only get 6 months afterwards. If you're in a 1.5-year program, you get 16 months. If you're in a 2-year program, for non-STEM ones, you get 18 months. If you're in a STEM major, you can apply for a STEM extension as well, which would be an additional 2 months of this. For 3-year programs, which is typically like for if you're a non-PhD program, 18 months. If you're in a PhD program, 36 months. That's again before and after for your academic training time. How many hours can I work? Well, during the fall and spring semester, it is limited to part-time only. In the summer, there is no exception, except unless it's your final semester. After you graduate, it must be at least 20 hours a week. Application process for this. Well, similar to the F1 students, the first thing you need to do while you're a student, or after if it is for you, you got to first find a job or internship. But again, you cannot start working there until you get the proper work authorization. So get the job offer with a future start date. Then you're going to complete the BIOS academic training form. You're going to have to get that approved by your academic advisors. And as was mentioned before, for the F1 students, this will be done by your GSPP career advisor for their review. And you'll submit the application to BIO with the employment verification letter along with it. If it's post-completion, again, because we would be extending your DS 2019 when you do that, we would have to show proof of funds to show that you have the ability to pay your way in the United States. That is a requirement for us to extend your DS 2019. And then if you're doing it afterwards, that would be a part of that. So allow us 5 business days, and we're going to give you a new DS 2019 as well as a letter that you can present to your employer that's formal looking. So you would present both your DS 2019 and this academic training letter. And then you can begin work when you're authorized on that DS 2019 and training letter, verification letter, excuse me. A few things to be mindful of here. So this is about mostly for post-completion academic training. The one thing is you must submit a post-completion request before the end date on your DS 2019. It is not possible for us to do it after your DS 2019 program end date. You must submit it before the program end date on your DS 2019 if you're wanting to stay in the United States and work after you graduate. Post-completion academic training will begin the day after your academic program ends, the academic training will start right after, but the job doesn't necessarily have to start the next day. The job has to start for post-completion academic training within 30 days of that program end date. So can't be a month and a half later. It must be starting within a month of your program end date. It's okay to change jobs or have more than one job, but each one would have to have updates and require a new AT authorization for you. All updates and on AT, everything, if you're ending IT early, final evaluations, any changes of address, anything must be submitted through the same system that F1 students call the SSU Hub. All updates go through there. One important thing to keep in mind for you in academic training, post-completion academic training, there can be no gaps in your employment. Important for you to keep in mind. So if your employment's ending and there's another one starting in a week or two, there can be no gaps. It must be back to back. There is no gaps in your employment in post-completion academic training. For more about this, please check out our academic training website or stop by and see us. For you J1s too, I did want to talk about your grace period. For F1s, it's 60 days. For J1s, you only have a 30-day grace period, okay? Oh, and I see an error right here. It says it is 30-day grace period that you have as a J1. Any extensions must occur before the end date on your DS 2019. And if you want to transfer things like that, that also must happen before your DS 2019 end date. If you fail to depart or take other actions but before the end of the grace period, this would also be a violation of your J1 status. So I know we're over time, so thank you all for staying late. Thank you all for the time today. Again, please check us out and come to see us in an advising session if you have some more questions. I know we're over time, but I'm happy to stay a little bit and answer any questions anyone has for a little bit longer.
Thank you so much, Jeremiah. If anyone left on the call has questions, feel free to type your question in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask. Any?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, can you
Yeah, you
hear
can call
me?
me Jerry. It's easier to say.
Okay,
Like,
I'm
tell my
sorry, I
Jerry.
cannot on my videos, I don't know, probably technical problems. Yeah, thank you for your information. I want to ask about how much AT do I get for like my program, an MPA program, which we have like 14 months, not like 12 months, but 14 months. Can it go with 18 months 80, or for us only get 9 months or for 80?
Um, I will say what I'll say is I would encourage you to come and I would want to look at your individual record, which I don't have the time to do to confirm everything. But generally speaking, it like what I would say is then this is likely going to be what's considered a year and a half program, which means that you have a 16 months of AT. But I would encourage you to either shoot an email to our office or to stop by an advising session so we can look at your specific profile to officially confirm that for you. Okay. But generally
Okay.
speaking, I would think based on what you're telling me, it's probably going to be considered a year and a half, which means you have 16 months. But I would, before I confirm, but don't take that without me having to look at your record. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Charlotte?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for the presentation. I have a question regarding CPT. So I'm interested in applying to a fellowship opportunity for the spring semester, and it's a part-time opportunity and also it's unpaid. And I
Okay.
was wondering if I need to apply for CPT for that, or is that considered like a volunteering opportunity?
Any off-campus employment, paid or unpaid, we recommend you get CPT work authorization for.
Okay,
So,
got it. Okay, thank you.
yep. Malvin?
Hi, Jeremy. Thank you for your presentation. I have two questions. The first, I want to ask about the AT for J1. The first question is, you said about proof of fund for AT for J1. I want to ask you to explain more about what do you mean by proof of fund.
Yeah.
And the second question is there any information about travel during the AT for for
Yeah.
J1?
Sure. So, great questions. The first about the proof of funds. That proof of funds is only required for the post-completion academic training because I mentioned, so your DS 2019 is a program end date. For like F1 students, that program end date doesn't change. For you J1 students, what happens when you apply for post-completion academic training, we're actually extending that end date on your DS 2019 as well. So any time that we extend to match when your academic training would be as well. So anytime that we extend your DS 2019, whether that's extending for AT or you're like, oh crap, I failed a bunch of classes and I need to extend another semester. In either situation, in order for us to extend the DS 2019 program ended on your DS 2019, the government requires us to see proof of funding that you have the eligibility to like whether study that semester or you have the proof of funds to show that you are able to live and work in the United States for that time period that we're extending your DS 2019. And I don't want to go specific into numbers and things like that because it will depend on what extending, but generally speaking, it's can be based on your salary, but those proof of funds are for the post-completion academic training.
Okay.
Regarding the travel on academic training, yes, travel is possible while you're on academic training. Let me see if I have you can pull up any website for you on that real quick. So on our academic training page, and I'm going to share my screen real quick for you. On the academic training page at the bios page, it does talk about, so this is the J1 academic training. If you scroll down here, rules 1 OPT, things like this, travel and reentry while on academic training. It has a list of documents you should have here with you, as well as tips about getting a J1 visa if it's during your post-completion AT or traveling. Make sure you have an updated travel endorsement on your DS 2019. But yeah, some of that guidance is right there on our AT website.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop record. Jeremiah, thank you so much
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm a
for
little
spending
long-winded and
time. No, it's definitely very important information, and we really appreciate you taking the time to explain all of the procedures and rules about work authorization
absolutely.
in the
We're here to
US.
help and make sure that students are knowing what they can do and what their steps are and what their responsibilities are. But really appreciate you taking the time. And my last message would be to all of you: if you have questions about any of this, review our website, but also come and see us at Bio. We are here to help you.
Thank you so much, Jeremiah.
Thank you.